Asterisk, you are fake. The voice was sharp, a crack of a whip in the hushed cathedral-like quiet of the bank lobby. It sliced through the gentle murmur of transactions, the soft whir of the cash-counting machines, and the distant polite cough of a customer in line. Those medals are a disgrace. The words were aimed at an old man standing patiently before a teller's window. His name was Samuel Finch. He was 89 years old. A man built of quiet angles and softened edges, his frame slightly stooped as if carrying a weight no one else could see. He wore a tweed jacket, the elbows worn to a soft sheen, and a pair of simple gray trousers. His hair was a wisp of white, combed neatly over a scalp mapped with the stories of 9 decades. But it was his eyes that held you. They were a pale, washed-out blue, the color of a winter sky, and they were as clear and steady as a ship's compass. He had just opened his jacket to retrieve his wallet, and for a fleeting moment, pinned to the worn lining of the tweed, 3 small, tarnished medals were visible. They were not grand or gaudy. They were modest, their ribbons faded, the metal dulled by time and obscurity. To the young security guard, whose name was Brody, they looked cheap. They looked like something a man would buy at a pawn shop to impress people. Brody was the antithesis of Samuel. He was young, maybe 25, and his uniform was so crisp it seemed to crackle when he moved. His chest was puffed out with the pride of his position. His jaw was set in a permanent state of self-importance, and his polished black shoes clicked with aggressive certainty on the gleaming marble floor. He saw the world in black and white, authority and submission, strength and weakness, new and old. Samuel, in his worn jacket and with his quiet patience, fell squarely into the latter categories. "Did you hear me, old-timer?" Brody's voice grew louder, drawing the attention of the few other people in the bank. A young woman with a baby stroller froze mid-step. The teller behind the glass, a kind-faced woman named Sarah, looked up with wide, uncertain eyes. Samuel turned his head slowly, his movements deliberate, economized by age. He looked at the young guard, his pale blue eyes holding no fear, no anger, only a placid curiosity. "I heard you," he said. His voice was soft, a little gravelly, like stones being turned over in a slow-moving stream. "Those are military medals," Brody stated, pointing a rigid finger at Samuel's jacket. "You can't just wear those. It's called stolen valor. It's a crime." He was reciting a line he'd probably learned in a training manual, and he delivered it with the smug satisfaction of someone who believed he was upholding a sacred law. Samuel looked down at his own chest as if noticing the medals for the first time in years. He gently touched one, a simple bronze star with a small V device. "They were given to me," he said simply, his voice unwavering. "Given to you. By who?" "The costume shop," Brody sneered, stepping closer. He was a good foot taller than the old man, and he used his height, his youth, his uniform to loom. He was enjoying this. He was the protector of honor, the guardian of the bank, and he was putting on a show. "Real heroes don't look like you, Grandpa. They're strong. They're proud. They don't shuffle around in old clothes looking for a handout." The teller, Sarah, flinched behind her counter. She could see the old man's hands. They were gnarled with arthritis, the knuckles swollen, the skin thin and translucent. But they rested calmly on the cool marble of the counter, perfectly still. There was a profound stillness about him that was more unsettling than any shouted retort could have been. It was the stillness of a mountain, of something that had weathered storms far greater than this young man's blustering. "I'm not looking for a handout." Gaze returning to Brody's face. "I'm here to deposit my pension check," he said. It so matter-of-factly it seemed to infuriate the guard even more. "Your pension?" Brody laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed in the high ceiling room. "Let me guess. You tell people you were some kind of secret agent to get a bigger check. People like you make me sick. You dishonor the men who actually fought. The men who actually bled." He jabbed a finger toward the metals again. "Take them off now, or I will remove you from this building." The threat hung in the air, thick and unpleasant. The other customers were now openly staring, their faces a mixture of discomfort and morbid curiosity. The bank manager, a man in a tight-fitting suit, peered out of his glass office, a frown creasing his brow, but he seemed hesitant to intervene. Brody was, after all, in charge of security. Samuel's gaze drifted past Brody to the polished marble floor. The way the overhead lights reflected off its surface reminded him of something else. A different kind of reflection, the cold black sheen of water at night. The cold. It seeped up through the solace of his thin shoes, a phantom chill that had nothing to do with the bank's air conditioning. Brody, mistaking the old man's silence for defiance, grew bolder. "Are you deaf, Pops? I said take them off. You're a fake, a fraud, and you're not welcome here." He reached out and grabbed Samuel's arm, his fingers wrapping around the thin bicep. And that's when it happened. The touch, the pressure of the young man's hand on his arm, firm and commanding. It wasn't the grip that did it. It was the combination, the cold floor beneath his feet, the sharp authoritative bark of the guard's voice, and the sudden confining pressure on his arm. The world of the bank, the marble, the hushed whispers, the smell of clean money and floor polish dissolved. It melted away into a memory so vivid, so potent, it was more real than the present. He was no longer Samuel Finch, an 89-year-old man in a bank. He was bosun's mate Finch, 21 years old, submerged in the freezing, ink-black waters of the Yellow Sea. The year was 1952. The cold was a living thing. A predator that gnawed at him through his primitive wetsuit, sinking its teeth into his bones. It wasn't just cold. It was a pressure, a force trying to crush the life from him. Above, the winter sky was starless, hidden by a thick, low-slung fog. There was no moon. There was only darkness, the muffled sound of his own breathing through the rebreather and the rhythmic, reassuring squeeze on his arm from Lieutenant Commander Hayes, the man swimming beside him. They were part of a secret unit, a small team of underwater demolition experts, tasked with missions the official Navy pretended didn't exist. Their target tonight was a railway bridge, a critical supply line for the enemy, just inside North Korean territory. They had been dropped by a submarine miles offshore and had swum the rest of the way, towing limpet mines behind them. The current was a brutal unseen enemy trying to drag them out to sea. Every kick of his fins was a battle. Every breath was a prayer. The pressure on his arm again Hayes' signal. "We're close. Maintain silence." Samuel could feel the vibration of the shore through the water, the low thrum of the earth itself. He could smell the iron-rich mud of the riverbank, a scent that cut through the sterile smell of his own recycled air. He remembered the feel of the coarse rope in his hands, slick with seawater and algae as they tethered their explosive payload. He remembered looking at Hayes' face in the brief shielded glow of a waterproof flashlight. The lieutenant commander's eyes were wide, alert, but his jaw was set with a calm that seemed impossible in this frozen hell. It was a calmness that flowed from him to the rest of the team. It was the calmness Samuel himself was now exhibiting in the bank. It was the armor of a man who had faced true fear and learned to wear it like a second skin. They reached the bridge pylons. The concrete was rough and slimed with years of river growth. It felt like the skin of a dead leviathan. Samuel's job was placement. His hands, though numb with cold, were steady. He knew the schematics of the mines by heart. He could have armed one blindfolded, and in this darkness he practically was. He worked with a focused intensity, his mind blocking out the pain, the cold, the gnawing fear that a sentry on the bridge above might hear the faint scrape of metal on concrete. A sound, a dog barking in the distance, then another. Footsteps, heavy boots crunching on the gravel path just above their heads. The team froze. Samuel felt Hayes' hand on his shoulder, a firm downward press. Stay down, don't move. Don't even breathe. Samuel flattened himself against the pylon, becoming one with the slime and the cold. The water amplified the sound, making the footsteps sound like thunder. He could hear voices speaking a language he didn't understand, but the tone was universal boredom, routine, a patrol. He held his breath until his lungs screamed, the pressure building behind his eyes. He watched the faint beams of their flashlights slice through the fog above the water's surface, dancing back and forth. A lifetime passed in those few minutes. The footsteps eventually receded. The barking faded. Silence returned, broken only by the lapping of the water. Hayes gave the signal. Proceed. Samuel finished his work, his fingers moving with renewed urgency. He set the timer, the faint click of the mechanism a death knell for the bridge. As he was securing the last charge, his hands slipped on the slick concrete. For a terrifying second, he lost his grip, his heavy gear threatening to pull him down into the silty riverbed. But before he could fall, another hand shot out and grabbed his arm, holding him fast. It was Hayes. He pulled Samuel back, steadied him, and gave his arm one last,